You made it to the Go Commando Show with Fred Galvin. On our new mission, we contend with the naked truths of health, leadership, and overcoming adversity. Now it's time to Go Commando.
Good morning, and yes, I would like to ask a question of how you would deal with the fact that regular morning in the fall of the year, two men unexpectedly showed up on your door and announced the unthinkable, that your son had been killed. And that's exactly what happened just over 11 years ago to our next guest, Debbie Austin. She is a Gold Star mom and a fellow Kansan here in Eastern Kansas. And she's going to briefly describe some of the events that occurred in her life when her son, Private First Class Shane Austin, who was serving in Iraq, was killed on October 8th. And it was a death that it was fairly unexpected in Ramadi, Iraq. And I'm going to allow her to describe a little bit of these events. So, Debbie, welcome, and thank you very much for being on the Go Commando Show.
Well, thank you, Fred, for having me. Thank you.
Yes. So, to most Americans, war is something that has not touched their families. As we know, and everybody's heard, that it's less than 1% who have actually fought for our country in today's era. And of that 1%, not to disparage those who have served, but even fewer have deployed overseas or deployed in a combat unit such as your son, or as in your son's case, not just been killed, but your son's extraordinary heroism is he showed the full devotion. Is when he was killed, it was because an enemy threw a grenade inside his tank, and he was going to recover and remove that grenade to save the lives of those fellow soldiers in his tank. He truly died in an act of valor, an act of heroism.
Yes, sir. Yes, he did. Shane lived his dream. He wanted to make this his career, and I guess you can say he did. It was a short-lived career, but he played Army men when he was a little boy. That was his thing, and he certainly had a daredevil personality. He was not afraid of anything. He accepted all dares. So when he told me he wanted to join the Army after 9/11, when he came to me and told me, I sat him down. I let him know that I was worried. I mean, we are in war. We're in the middle of a war, and that he would be deployed. He would be serving. But it's what he wanted to do. And I told him, I said, I will not ever mention to you again how afraid I'm going to be. I will just be 100% supportive, because I didn't want him worrying about me, worrying about him.
For those listeners and viewers, Debbie and I both live here in Eastern Kansas, so the military presence is, especially with the Army, I mean, you're a concerned mom.
Yes.
Talking to your son who, 9/11 had occurred it was still in our minds.
Yes.
And our son is actually born on New Year's Eve, so she really must have loved him to deliver right on
Yes.
New Year's Eve. The good thing is he did know. I mean, it wasn't some people join the military and they get out and they're dealing with a lot of things because they didn't expect what they got into. But your son did.
Knew what he was getting into.
Especially with the bases, not just at Fort Leavenworth, but Fort Riley, an Army division, infantry division right here in Kansas, and having multiple family members having served. So he was aware of when 9/11 happened. You said that was fairly significant, and that stuck in his mind. And he not just only volunteered, but he aggressively stood forward to answer his country's call.
Right.
Correct.
Right. It was his passion. It was, and I've been asked several times, knowing because of the outcome, would I have tried to change his mind going back? And I can honestly say, I don't think I would, because how do you take away a young man's dream? And this was his passion. And it's not my place as a mother to do that. But that doesn't mean I can't be concerned and worried about him. So, yeah, he graduated boot camp Mother's Day 2006.
Oh,
We actually drove, my mom, my sister, my niece, and my husband at the time. We drove to Kentucky, rented a van, drove to Kentucky, picked him up. And I remember thinking to myself on the way home, wow, I picked up the wrong boy. I mean, Shane wasn't ornery. He was ornery, but he earned so much respect for himself that it showed. You know, when you have that much respect for yourself, it shows, and you tend to have respect for everything and everyone around you.
yes.
So.
And in growing up, I'd been made aware of a story about, you mentioned how ornery your son was, that he was kind of a daredevil and he had no fear, and he actually made a homemade go-kart of sorts and went out and rode it off the side of the barn.
He was just a bit ornery, yes. I didn't even hear that story until after he was killed. So, so there's some, I think there's, and that's probably good. There's probably some more stories floating around out there that I'm unaware of.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of those experiences, how he lived before he joined the Army?
Well, like I said, he had a daredevil personality. He never turned down a dare. He had a very diverse group of friends. He was, and I will say he was ornery, and I mean, I can't deny that. But his heart, he had a heart of gold. Everyone knew the Austin boys in Edgerton, Kansas. He loved life, and that's, I guess, probably the best way to sum it up. He just really loved life and loved his family, and his friends meant everything to him. He wanted to, one of his things, this was one of his goals in life for a long time. He wanted to be in a rock and roll band and a doctor. So we kind of teased him as far as being a rock and roll doctor, but that was one of his things, goals in life.
Yes. He had that confidence and he had those goals, and but it's really truly extraordinary when someone who has those things that he wants to accomplish himself, can put those aside and know unhesitantly. And with your son, that's instinct. Somebody threw a grenade inside his, Abrams tank, and he immediately responded to save the lives of his fellow soldiers. And that's, just incredibly heroic, knowing some people, as we know, they fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
Your son did not freeze.
No.
He did what he knew needed to be done. And in today's day and age, that's just not something that most people even want to put themselves in a position like that.
Right. And that's, I truly in my heart believe that there are certain personalities that are meant to be in the military, and my personality would not fit. I don't have that instinct. And Shane did. Some are just born with it, and it was definitely his instinct. And that's why I said earlier that it would be hard and really unfair for me to try to talk him out of doing something that it was in God's plan, I guess.
Yes. And I know it's been said several times, about his work ethic and how hardworking an individual Shane was. And right after high school, he was working here in Johnson County, Kansas, with some trucking companies, and it's almost like that didn't satisfy something with him, because I don't want to speak for him, but I know for myself, there's something in your heart, especially with an instance like 9/11. I mean, he truly knew this is what he wants to do, and he feels it's in his blood.
It was definitely in his blood. It definitely was. And you could tell by the phone calls and just the photos that I received that he was very proud of what he was doing.
Yes. And then, so immediately after he took a little bit of time off after his basic training, he was assigned over to Baumholder, Germany with the...
He left June 12th, 2006. Graduated Mother's Day, left June 12th, 2006, which happens to be my sister's birthday. That was the day we put him on the airplane for Germany.
Yes.
And then I get the knock on the door October 8th, 2006.
So it was very shortly.
Very short.
After he was in Germany, he probably did a little training with his unit before he deployed? And
a little training and probably a little partying too. There's some of the pictures he would send me. It was,
you've sent me, so those will be here as the
he sent me some
viewers
fun pictures. Yes.
And for those on the podcast, you can go to YouTube channel and see not just Debbie but her son Shane, and look at some of these photos of he was living a rock star lifestyle
Yes.
while he was in the Army, and but it was very soon that he in his tank company, that he was in the Alpha Company, and as a young Marine out. It was a while ago. I was serving in a tank company as a young, corporal in Alpha Company when I first went to combat. So I can relate to your son, although the experiences and location were different. We had moved into Kuwait, and your son was actually in Ar Ramadi,
Right.
which is in 2006 was a very extremely violent area. That, to the listeners that are not completely familiar, the Iraqi army had been defeated immediately in 2003, but at this time there was groups of mujahideen who were, some were former military, some were foreign fighters from all around, the Middle East. And one of these foreign fighters, or one of these, say, insurgents, was able to, unfortunately, make a very lucky shot with a grenade and throw it into, which does show not just the luck, but the skill of who, the American soldiers were fighting against in Iraq. And this was 2006, that time period in Ar Ramadi. It was a very tough fight that did change. Ramadi the year later was a completely different story.
Right.
So some people think it's all gone, but your son's life really mattered, and it changed how things occurred in Iraq.
Yes. And I got to talk to, he called me the day before. It was a Sunday that I got the notification, but I got to talk to him Saturday. And of course, at that point, he couldn't tell me. All he told me was he was patrolling a city, but he could not really give me much more information. So,
Right.
But I will cherish that phone call.
I'm sure. And so that Sunday morning, that's, he basically was able to sneak a quick phone call before, they departed the base and went out on their patrol. And then you received a notification from, 2 Army soldiers.
Yes. Yeah. I received his phone call on Saturday. Sunday, I actually worked in a warehouse. So I got off that Sunday morning. The Chiefs game was on, and that was one of Shane's favorite pastimes, was to watch the football. So it was an afternoon game, 12 o'clock. During halftime, I decided to go up and take a shower, and that is when that's when the 2 faces showed up at my door.
Yes.
And my husband at the time answered the door, came up to get me, and it just seemed so unreal and so surreal. Actually, it just was. I didn't want to believe it.
Yes.
And my husband at the time, was not allowed to. He didn't know definite what was going on, though he sensed it. So I went downstairs, and all I could the 2 faces, I can see them clearly, and all I heard was the 5 words that changed my life forever: "We regret to inform you." Right. And I don't really know what they said after that.
Yes. So was there any thought in your mind that, Shane had other siblings, that these 2 gentlemen could be there to recruit him?
It's funny that you say that, because yes, actually, and I think that was what I wanted to believe at the time, because my youngest son, Kyle, was still in high school.
Yes.
And it's like, they're just here to recruit him. They're just here to recruit my son. That's all. But, in the back of my mind, deep inside, I knew they don't come to your door.
Sunday.
On a Sunday especially. So but that's not, I wanted to believe that that's what they were. And as soon, like I said, when I heard the words, "We regret to inform you," I knew then.
Yes. And that pain, I know, is just indescribable. And how have you specifically, found solace and been able to deal with with what happened?
Well, going back to the day that it happened, I don't know that it was painful that day. For a few days after that, I don't know that the heartache was there yet, because I think I was in
Yes.
shock and disbelief.
Yes.
I actually felt like I was watching a movie of a mother going through this.
Yes.
So the pain hadn't quite hit me yet. Then once the pain did and it became reality, I felt guilty to laugh. It was just, there was a guilt there too, associated with the heartache and the shock. Several months after that, though, I realized I can cry for the rest of my life, no matter how many tears I shed or how deep the pain in my heart. Shane's not coming home. He's physically not coming home.
Yes.
And he would not want me to still be locked up in my room for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have 2 surviving sons. I had a lot to live for.
Yes.
And it was me. It's my responsibility at this time to keep my son's memory alive.
Yes.
And with that said, I just decided to reach out and find different organizations and say his name.
Yes.
But at the same time, I don't want that heartache to go away either. I want to be allowed that heartache, because once we stop grieving, they're forgotten. Grief is the price we pay for love. And so
Yes.
I may shed a tear and smile at the same time. I wear my grief proudly.
Yes. And rightfully so. I mean, a lot of people talk about how life can be imperfect, and it is.
It is imperfect.
It is
yes.
imperfect. And a lot of people try to find somebody to blame, whether it's the government. This person in the military, the Army, didn't do right. Your son, from an outsider perspective, they did posthumously promote and award him for valor. And, I think some individuals often forget or, start to think of ways to blame or accuse. But, there are many people that did, what they knew was the right thing to do. And there's organizations such as both of ours that seek to help
Right.
Families of the fallen in several different ways.
Yeah, exactly. The organizations that we work with are great. They are great. American Gold Star Mothers, we have a Northeast chapter that does great. Our Fort Leavenworth SOS,
That's the Survivor
Outreach Services, does a great job at bringing us together. And that's kind of what's important, is to have the fellowship of other families.
Yes. And there are so many people, and I'm not talking the Gold Star families here, but, when I retired, our sister was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It was terminal. And there's so many people that I've found since then that have, had a family member, very similar, terminal illness, and they don't know where to go. And some of them, like you said, they try to lock themselves in a closet, isolate themselves. And some, because it is a little bit different situation when it's known and it can be planned, or in your case, it was not necessarily, it could have been a possibility, but it was kind of a surprise.
Right.
But a lot of listeners are able to develop, some of the strengths that you have in understanding how did Debbie Austin, how was she able to overcome this? And, where did she find her strength? You said, you had, other children, and, you had a community, and in that community with not just the Army, but other Gold Star mothers surrounded you and showed you that love, where other people who isolate themselves, and there's a number of people, whether they're TV, radio, that tell you, you can find the strength, you can have the discipline. And I've just found in those cases, those are oftentimes coming from people that haven't gone through a crucible like that. And you really have, and you've, really turned this around, and you are currently helping other people with, the charities that you're involved with that are very, selfless, and they truly do serve
Right.
other Gold Star families.
Well, and I was one of the families that was never angry. I was never angry at the military or the Army for my son being killed. It was what he signed up for. It's what he knew. We all knew the risk.
Yes.
I mean, I know he didn't sign on the dotted line knowing, boy, I hope I die on the battlefield. But he knew that option. He knew that was. So, and then, I had so much to look forward to, 2 surviving boys, and I had to be strong for them. And my mom said something once that she lost a grandson, but she also lost a part of her daughter. So she had to be strong,
Yes.
So I have a very good, supportive family. But sometimes in life you have 2 choices. I had a choice of just being depressed for the rest of my life.
Yes.
Or I had a choice to, that's not going to get you anywhere. But sometimes it's hard to get out of that point, that black hole once you get in it. And I just wasn't going to allow myself to get deep in the black hole. So I just decided to move forward and do positive things.
Yes. And your case is so unique and able to help so many different other people out there because, Debbie had mentioned in our family, it was very much the same situation. You're from Northeast Kansas. There's military bases. You know what you're getting into. And I have seen in other cases where, families, even though that their son was going into the military and into a combat arms field, they didn't necessarily, it was not imagined at all. And some, I think, grieve more and have a harder time getting over it when that is so completely unexpected. Like, there's so many people that they weren't in a combat type of unit. It wasn't infantry or tanks. It was a quartermaster or just a regular, 10th Typewriter Battalion or the PowerPoint platoon. They were out on a patrol and it was completely unexpected for them to even leave the wire. And that's one thing that is a tragedy that the service member was killed. But I've seen that the ripple wave and shock wave effect on the families who just, they feel betrayed and they want to, lash out against somebody because they think that should have never happened because their son or daughter was in a different type of a unit, that it shouldn't have been there. But I mean, they're joining the military with the mission to, defend, our
country.
nation.
Yes, yeah. And I have so many friends, on my Gold Star journey, I've met so many friends and families that their loved one was not killed on the battlefield. Yes. They may have been home on leave.
Yes.
And in a car accident or so many different ways. And in a way, I think that might be a little bit harder because they weren't on the battlefield. And
right. And some die, unfortunately, in a way that's not only not glorious, but sometimes it's shameful and it hurts the family even more that, whether it was an overdose or a car accident without, some of that, the family can't really accept that truly did happen.
Right. When they're at home and then there's guilt in their minds too, because they felt that they could stop it. And that is something, and I could have very well been dealing with that if Shane did come home.
Yes.
It could have been something I'm dealing with, but so, and I can't put myself in that family's position or how they feel, but my heart does go out to them.
Yes.
They served the country just like my son did, and their pain, it doesn't matter how you lose a loved one, whether it's in the military or cancer or how that pain in that heart, the grieving process is the same, and you are without your loved one, and it's devastating.
Yes. I have a ton of military friends after serving for over 26 years that, came back and have some of that survivor's guilt. They've, and I'm sure just like with Gold Star families, a sibling or a brother in arms, that they were very, very close to, in the special operations community, some of those relationships, I mean, you're waking up with that person. I mean, sometimes it's not physically intimate, but sometimes that person in a special
It's a
operations team
family.
is very, very close. And
Yes.
you know, not just the names, but the birthdays, and you know all the details of their family. And sometimes that really does get in the psyche. And unfortunately, when I returned in the VA and other groups that try to help veterans, are often, it's through counseling, often with prescription medication, which I feel is trying to allow yourself or a network to try to solve the problem through some kind of logical, systematic, disciplined approach. And one of the gals who I used to date a long time ago was a Navy nurse who did mental health, and I wasn't a patient of hers, but she always said, the first step that we train people, and I wish this was more prevalent. She said, it's accepting and relying on a higher being. And in my case, knowing that, not just when I was in combat and fighting, or in times like when we were in Iraq, right around the same time as your son, that, we were almost over Iran. And it's kind of nerve-wracking, but, you have to be able to rely on something. And that's, the drugs, the alcohol, that doesn't help you during that time or after. And for me, it was relying, somebody who's listening to this, they can have a bad day, whether it's getting pulled over for a speeding ticket on the highway, being let go because there's some downsizing at your job. There's bad things that happen, but when it's much bigger than yourself, you need to have something that's bigger than that problem. And that's often not going to be drugs or alcohol or prescription medications. For myself, on the battlefield and off, I found that, being able to, believe, that God is going to be there for me always was what truly helped me have a life that's worth living, or a life that I can help, my friends and Gold Star families, and that really changes people's lives. And that's I think when we get it off of ourselves and focus on God and on others, that's when we're, really doing something. And it's because trying to attempt, when it's a true crucible, trying to attempt using just discipline doesn't
always work. No. And it's funny because, there's things, you asked me about being emotional, and there are certain questions. You can ask me a question today and I can handle it. It affects me different than maybe tomorrow. You can ask me the same exact question and it may be more emotional for me. It's kind of interesting how that goes. But, and you have bad days and you have good days.
Yes.
But I really do rely on my faith and my family. That's important. It's just, and if it's not your family, if, people that may not have close family and support of a family, you sometimes have to search. You may have to search a little harder, but there is something out there that you can remain positive.
When you talk about family, and you're wearing right over your heart a Gold Star lapel pin, you are not just a part of a Gold Star organization, which I'd like to have you talk about, but you are actively engaged in helping the members in that organization, from new members and the pain that they may be suffering from a recent raw event, but, you're very active in helping others. And can you tell me a little bit about your involvement in the charities?
Well, as soon as your loved one dies while serving our country, you become a Gold Star family member. Automatically, you become a Gold Star family. Then there's an organization, American Gold Star Mothers, that is a national organization, almost 100 years old. And we are a service organization, so we work within our community to recognize, honor our veterans, those that are currently serving their families. We are also provide fellowship with new families, Gold Star families that are just beginning their journey, that may not understand it yet.
Yes.
And not just the new ones. What we have found is we have family members from conflicts before that may not have known about the American Gold Star Moms or even understand the services that are offered to them. So we try to reach out to them. And though it's American Gold Star Mothers, but I just want to be clear that we work along with the siblings, the fathers, the grandparents. The
widows or
widowers, yes, and even though the organization has mothers in it, they can become associate members, but any event that we do, they are very welcome to it. The whole community is welcome, but we are a service community. We'll do things like sending goodie bags overseas or help a veteran, volunteer at the VA hospital.
Yes, and that's where we connected with an event that the University of Kansas decided they'd like to host, and we were very grateful. Just this past month, and our two organizations that both serve Gold Star families came together, and it really has a lot of meaning when the service member's family, oftentimes, a veteran with a visible wound, such as an amputation or
right.
That you can tell a burn, something that horrible, those are visible, and a lot of people see a young person, maybe some tattoos or some military clothing, and they say that, thank you for your service. But with the Gold Star families, often right after the death, the families, they may be living on base, and then they have to really uproot their life and move off the base, and then their connection with the close connected friends that they knew in the military is often cut off, and that's very difficult, and that in a similar way can be what a lot of people do when they're told, hey, you're fired, and they relocate, and a lot of veterans that have something very difficult that they're dealing with, they go back home and they cut themselves off. But one of the important things I want to talk about is your organization and ours. We do a lot of events, but if you could talk about some of the events that you have walkathons, ways that people can give, and then Reese Across America has an event that's coming up here where in November, and as it's getting a little cold, right before the holidays, there's an annual way that they remember the courage of the lives that were lost in the service of our country, and how is that specifically done?
Well, Reese Across America is out of Maine. It's a national organization also out of Maine that the American Gold Star Mothers have partnered up with.
Yes.
What we do, it's every second Saturday of December. So this year it's December 16th. Our chapter of the American Gold Star Mothers Northeast Kansas chapter recognizes and works with at Leavenworth National to lay wreaths. It gives us the opportunity to, again, say their names and remember, honor, and teach our younger generation that our freedom isn't free. But for me personally, I get to lay a wreath on somebody who maybe have fought in World War I, that.
Yes.
And so their family has the comfort of knowing that their loved one was not forgotten.
Yes. And when you talk about, the Reese Across America, you mentioned World War I. There's the actual Gold Star designation was created by the U.S. government right after World War I, and the two states, we're right here on the border, is Jayhawks. Yes. We're on the border of Kansas. Missouri's a few miles east of here, and when we do things, it's often with both states.
Yes.
And in these two states, since World War I and since Gold Star became a term by the U.S. government, there's over 16,000 American service members that died in combat. And that, when you put it in that type of perspective, that is significant. That like your son, he didn't take his uniform off. He died. He was killed in action. And that's what we hope, that at this season, the second Saturday of December, they can, and I'll let you talk about the websites and how they can get involved, but they can show their respect, because what you're talking about isn't exclusive to Gold Star families, anybody can.
Absolutely. Anyone can do it. It's actually nationwide, across the nation, December 16th, 11 o'clock our time. And that it's simultaneously we lay the wreaths have ceremonies and lay the wreaths. Yes. So, and it doesn't, it's remember, honor, and teach. So we love to see the younger generation out there to help us. And we ask when you lay the wreath on the grave to say their name. Maybe go home and Google. That way you'll learn about that person that fought for your country and that fought for our freedom.
Yes. And last year, the organization that we founded for Gold Star families, we did a very similar thing to teach by the Kansas City Chiefs wanted to partner in a way that could communicate to the players, and it was decided that we'll have 60 families from Kansas and Missouri where the name and ranks of service members who had fallen since 9/11, and they wore a warm-up hoodie with a name and rank, and so it was very important. A lot of people, there's been a lot of unfortunate controversy because people have not been taught what it means. They haven't taught, that this should be something that is respected, the service, or they politicize it with one political party or the next, which is, I think, is completely despicable and indescribable. But the Kansas City Chiefs did something very positive at their Salute to Service game right before, it was a year ago this time, on November 8th. Or I think it may have been November 6th, but regardless, all those players entered the locker room. Some kneeled down at the jersey. I made cards that had the name, information about the service member, how they died, their hometown, their age, so that those players in that NFL franchise, the Kansas City Chiefs, could understand that this person, in many cases, is around the same age that they are and has died. And often, like you said, a lot of people were watching football that day. And I know in your son's case, when he returned to the United States, his casket was flown in, commercial aircraft.
Yes.
And that's how some people, but it is very few, come to understand that, there is a tangible cost, when they're on the plane and it's announced that a service member's killed and is flying on the plane. So
that was a pretty powerful moment too, because I looked up at the tarmac there, and I saw all these faces watching as Shane was taken out of the airplane with the flag over his casket. It was, I still see that vision very closely in my head.
Yes, and that's hopefully, Americans. It's not meant to highlight or diminish one or the other, but it's meant to realize that there is a cost, and there's pain when you see a loved one come back in a flag draped coffin. It's not proper and appropriate to do things that so viciously and sometimes unknowingly offend a particular group of Americans.
Well, and when my son, and I believe this probably with everybody that signs their name on the dotted line, when they sign up, they don't go overseas to fight for one religion or one political belief or one skin color. Or one sexual preference. They fight for all of us as Americans. Yes. And that's, I think that's why some of this sometimes just gets a little frustrating, because we're all Americans.
Yes. And that's a very, very powerful point. And when I first started, there was kind of an ambiguity in the late 80s, because we came out of the Vietnam era where people did not support the military service members. And in the 80s, we hadn't been really fighting large wars. People didn't really know how to get behind the troops. When we went to Desert Storm, what you had just described, people realized that, this is nonpartisan. It's not one political party to the next. And these men and women answered their country's call.
Right.
They took a stand to fight for our country, and there they go. They're showing selflessness and courage to defend, our way of life. Whether you agree with one,
Exactly.
the service members, and that has become almost a blanket statement. And when we were training with the British Royal Marine Commandos over in Scotland right before I retired, I remember an American lady came and talked to us right next to Loch Ness, the big lake up there in Scotland. She said, "Thank you for your service," because we were wearing our Marine uniforms. And the Brit Commando had said, he freaked out. He said, "What did that lady say?" And I said, "She just said, thank you for your service." And he said, they would never say that in the UK. In Britain, they would never say that. And that's something that as service members, we have to protect. I should say, not just the service members that are out there, is veterans that, when we see things that are not right, such as, somebody using things for political gain, we have to make sure that, America is America because people stood in 1776 and they decided we're going to be a free country. We're going to fight, and we will sign our lives away. Our Constitution was written in blood of Americans that's been paid for 241 years. So that being said, what are some of the upcoming events specifically that somebody can get involved in, as well as what is a email address, or not a website address, that they can go to for further information?
Well, American Gold Star Mothers National would be AmericanGoldStarMothers.com.
Okay.
And for Reese Across America, it's ReeseAcrossAmerica.org.
Okay.
And I do ask, though, if you do the Reese Across America, that you use our location ID, which is KSLNCL, which would have the wreaths delivered to Leavenworth National, and use our fundraising group ID as KSOOP. And the reason we do it as a fundraiser, because that allows us to have the sponsored wreaths, and then we do it as a fundraiser, so we get money back for each wreath. And that way we're honoring those that are no longer with us, that are laid to rest at Leavenworth National. And then we have money to maybe help sponsor a honor flight.
Yes.
Or send, packages over to our veterans that are, and our heroes that are fighting overseas, or maybe help be supportive of a family.
Yes. Well, are there any other topics or anything else you'd like to address?
No, I just, sometimes, life isn't fair. Things, you get up and you may have your hot water heater's not working, or you may have to stand in the grocery line you happen to be in the longest line in the grocery store, or specifically Walmart, because they always. But that's a small thing in life. Sometimes that's just a small thing. We can get through that.
Yes.
Sometimes we really have to search for something that's positive and look for the bright side of things. But there usually is a bright side.
When I was in the Marines, it wasn't that long ago, but I was not into any of the social media, and really just, it was the job. And that caused me, because there were not a lot of those distractions, to really focus and anticipate that, I was a young infantry officer and served in special operations. I knew and could focus on what could happen. And now that I'm a retired Marine, often I don't think of all the bad things that can go on. But you have to, like you said, realize that is something small. And as a man or woman, to be a leader, to step up and understand that in the whole big scheme of things, that what just happened, whether it's that speeding ticket or the hot water heater breaking down, or, you have to understand and anticipate that, and realize that, we are not in a perfect world, and we have to anticipate setbacks, and that you're going to be uncomfortable when those occur. And that when you have something that's larger than that happen, such as the death of a loved one, or something truly life-changing in a negative way, that's when it's bigger than yourself, and you have to rely on something that's bigger than that. And that is not your own self-discipline or a bottle or, some drugs. And that's unfortunately where so many people go to relieve the pain, or they think they can handle it on their own. And I'm here to tell you, talking to so many friends, and I've seen the ones that try to use those ways. And that's what a lot of people tell you, whether they're veterans or counselors, like, you can do this on your own by taking this pill and everything. So that's not the right way of doing business. And you can overcome that. And that's getting your life right with God. You're going to be, if you seek that direction, you're going to be able to, solve the problem that you're facing. So, but thank you so much, Debbie, for being on our show today. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we have a great turnout, not just at this Reese Across America, but at future Gold Star family events. And if there are other Gold Star families out there, both of our organizations, we'd love to have you attend and reach out to us. So
and if I could just add, just end by saying, as a family that's lost a loved one, we don't want people to feel bad for us. We don't want sympathy. We just ask for support. And, with some of the things that we do, or just a simple thank you to a veteran, you know. And it's just about, there's so many great organizations out there, and it's just great to see that we can work together. Yes. When we stand together, we stay strong, and that's...
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Appreciate it.
To all my fellow grunts out there who in your youth felt it was your duty to protect us, I salute you. And thanks to the listeners of the Go Commando Show who labor on the farm, who are sweating on the construction site, putting forth your very best at the office. You are making a difference. Support the Go Commando Show in our pursuit of bringing you the highest quality professionals. Infiltrate the website at gocommandoshow.com, where you can view all of the podcasts and arm your team with incredible deals on health supplements, commando clothing, and equipment. Every time that you get a good deal, it supports the show. What deals? When you purchase anything from the website, Amazon, healthcare supplements, you're covering our six. And to the ladies on the team, when you outfit yourself in the super sexy threads from Naked Zebra, and yes, I'm talking about in fuego, you are firing the sniper shot for our commandos. How else can you support? It's simple. You smash the follow and subscribe buttons on our social media. That is how you support us bringing great guests to talk about serious subjects, not the mainstream media's fake news. So thank you, and until our next show, stay in the attack and go Commando.